positive. This is a resistive gluten loss. You just or you just get it. Gluten before before load on or all very open here. Trying to avoid well range. Put gluten really 4 months. Argue with you. How do you or incredibly and you really need to go back and review because of how close with or well this is not unusual. interested in at least 50 of these, and we find oral delivery. Taking a complete if the word and you or